Okay, so we are on the draw here. And we open up with a good amount of ramp cards. We have Tamatoa, which, you know, is our in-game character, but we don't really need him at the moment. Okay, so not a lot of early game. Well, I mean, we do have a good curve, actually. 2 into 3. We'll be looking for a 1-drop. Okay, get the Hades. So our curve is really nice here. We have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But it's just a matter of always getting a card that we can ink to help us get there. Mickey Mouse will definitely help, but it is a little slower of a tempo play, and so if their board starts getting big, then we'll have to watch out for that. Going against Amber. This is Pixelborn Thaddeus, I believe is the name. Okay, so this is Amber Steele. We see the aerial, so this could be the sing-song version. We get a third Mickey. So I opt for the Maleficent here because I value the card draw a little bit higher. And because I don't know if we're going to get an inkable card next turn, I go ahead and crash the Grandma to give us 5 for Maleficent. Okay, Tinkerbell comes down, so we know that Big Tink is probably a threat. He must have 2 in his hand. Otherwise, I'm not sure why he would want to ink the Tinkerbell. So I'm thinking about doing maybe double Mickey Mouse here, because we did draw an inkable card. This will help us just get to our magic number 8. And then we could start playing out cards. So I don't quest because I don't want him to shift and run into Mickey Mouse and deal 2 damage to another Mickey Mouse. So I choose to just keep everyone readied. We see a Be Our Guest come out. Pulls the Tinkerbell to hand. And goes a little bit wider on the board. So I'm thinking about the Tinkerbell here. I know that he just pulled 1 to hand, so because it could be a pretty big threat to us with all that power, I go ahead and just Hades away the Tinkerbell, so at least she can't come down with rush, well, quote unquote rush. I feel safe enough to quest here. He'd have to lose a couple lore to take out just 1 Mickey, so seems like a fair trade. Looks like he's going to sing Be Our Guest with Ariel. Gets a 7 cost Stitch to hand. Be a nice target for Hades here. Gets a couple more cards with Rapunzel. Inks a Cerberus. So here, I know there's not a big threat on board, so Hades isn't really needed. I think about Maurice, but we don't really have any items in our hand. However, if we do draw into some items, it'll be nice to get a reduction in their cost. So now it's time to clean up the board a little bit. And I think about the Stitch for a second, but the Ariel being able to sing Whole New World or Grab Your Swords is just too powerful at this stage in the game. And so if he wanted to play one of those, he'd have to hard cast it, and that would take up most of his turn. Tinkerbell comes down, but since we destroyed the earlier Tinkerbell, we don't have to worry about it crashing into us just yet. So here I'm kind of thinking if that's a good enough target for Hades. And I ultimately make the decision that it is, if they want to play the Stitch out and draw some cards, that is fine. It's not as upsetting as destroying our board at the moment, in my personal opinion. So we do have 6 lore on board now. Hades is now in range of a Grab Your Sword. For 8 cost, we do have the Maleficent Bell combo, putting out an additional 5 lore onto the board. It's pretty good, especially when Bell and Maleficent cannot be destroyed by 1 Grab Your Swords. He's also rushing the board with a total of 8 lore on the board right now. Does have the lore lead. So I decide to also rush the board. Because he has the lore lead, I decide to make some trades here and tie up the game. So I know that at least 1 card in his hand is the 7 cost Stitch. However, it feels like a slow tempo play to play it at this moment. Instead, we see the Tinkerbell come down, getting rid of the Hades. Now we do have 9 lore on the board versus his 8. So he doesn't have lethal unless he quests with the Rapunzel. Okay, decides to quest, which puts him at lethal now. I opt for the more card draw here with Robin Hood. We do get the Scepter. This will allow us to quest with 1 character while supporting the other. So we get a free card draw for Maurice. And I decide to, since we're at the end of the game, just flood the board here. So Maleficent offers the most lore gain, with also some decent stats. So we support the 3 into Marie. I believe Maurice here, because we want to trade into the Rapunzel. And then we just do some trading just so that we're not in lethal range anymore, but have a very established board. So I think about the Hades trade here. If I go to 4, he can clean up the Hades. And I ultimately decide that this is worth it, because although he can destroy 2 cards with Tinkerbell, which will most likely be Hades and Maurice, we just have such a big board built up with what looks like 2, 4, 5, 8 lore on the board, even if he kills those 2, that we should still be in a good spot here. Grab your sword would be a pretty good option. At this point, I would get rid of Flounder, Belle, Maurice. And then he could run into Maleficent and take out Hades, but I guess my opponent didn't have that option available. Opts to put the 2 damage on Maleficent. Ah, okay, so it did have the grab your sword. So now we're only at a 5 lore on the table. Oh, and gets the heal with Rapunzel. That's really big for my opponent. So here's an interesting board state when it comes to trading. I wonder what you would do in this position. What I'm thinking about here is I could get the 1 lore from Maleficent, but then I would lose Robin Hood to Tinkerbell, and then Rapunzel could crash into me. So instead, I end up just questing with both and not trading at all, because I have lethal on the board with Belle and Maleficent, and just decide that if he can't cast 2 grab your swords, then I don't think he can win this game. Or perhaps a grab your sword and smash. But we've seen 1 come out. What are the odds of him having 2 more, right? Fingers crossed. And my opponent decides to concede. We take the victory in that very close game. Amber Steele. Alright, we're going to be on the draw again here. This is quite the hand. I see the Maurice. I see the item. We have a 2-3 line, but I don't think we need all the Donald Ducks. So we have a 1-2-3 play. 1-2-3-4 play, actually. Now, obviously, the big concern... Alright, we see a Maui get inked. Okay, so immediately I'm thinking this is some kind of Ruby Amethyst potentially control deck. We throw down the Flounder and pass turn, forcing my opponent to play a 2-drop. Or either get traded on or quested on. So the thing about Ruby Sapphire and why I don't think a lot of players play this combination is because there isn't very much card draw. However, there actually is to a certain extent. So with blue, the majority of your card draw, yes, you have things like Robin Hood or Maurice, those are very, it's not like Amethyst where you could just play Maleficent and get a card. It's not like Mad Hatter where you can tap and your opponent will eventually have to swing into you or spend a lot of cards to kill you. It's not like orange where you can Rapunzel, so you don't get the immediate effects. But where blue really does come in handy is the fact that you have multiple ramp options, and by ramping, you are essentially drawing a card that you would otherwise just ink. And so that's the kind of mindset you have to have going into a deck with not a lot of draw options. You have to be very patient, and you have to really be cognizant of what you're doing with your hand. So you have to pay attention to what cards are inkable, what cards are not inkable, and it results in a very meticulous gameplay, but it can be rewarding. So my hope is that more players will adapt Ruby Sapphire and come up with new combinations. So we have Donald Duck, Flounder, and Belle. So we have a lot of threats on the board that can deal with Aladdin. My expectation is that... Oh. That was a great play here to run into the Donald. So a pretty even board state here. We have a damage Rafiki, we're tied in lore, we have one more card than our opponent, and same ink count. So we go for value here. We don't mind trading the Flounder because we'd rather trade the Flounder than the Belle. We know our opponent won't trade into us, and so now we're questing for 2. At first I didn't think I would add the Belle to the deck. I thought it was maybe too cheesy, you know, just because it's an item deck, you want to add Belle. But she is a 2 quester for 3 and does provide support for our items, so it just kind of made sense. And has a better lineup, has a better line than something like Cheshire Cat, which opponents can often play around. So we get hit with the Aladdin there. Kind of expect that on turn 5. And now our opponent is running out of gas. So I choose to go in here. I want to eliminate as many characters from their board so that we can eventually get to that Pascal. And we're thinking about what to ink. What's going on through my head is I want to progress to Maurice. And although it's nice to get 2 Maurices out, I think I need to advance the board state here and apply more pressure to force my opponent to get another character on board. My assumption is that they're probably holding a Be Prepared, and the other card we don't know yet. And now they have 2 cards. Okay, so we know one is Aladdin, and we know the other is Tips. So we have to just assume that the last card is a Be Prepared. So just in the nick of time, we drew Maleficent. It's kind of a play 1 card a turn type of deck. We didn't get a lot of ramp in this game, and so the downside of that is we're a little behind. We're kind of playing, you know, with the ink that we've been dealt. However, if we do get an inkable card, okay, so it's a 5-for-5 trade, and our opponent's still out of gas, yet they have board control to a certain extent, because we will be able to trade into multiple characters if they decide. Okay, so they do decide to go full quest. And right away, we don't want the Aladdin to shift, in case he top decks that. We see a great opportunity to get Maurice out, and then we can start drawing some cards. So if you are playing against this deck in the future, just know that Maurice is a great target for the Dragon's Breath or any kind of removal, Hades or anything like that, because this would be one of their very few ways to draw cards in the deck. Outside of that, it really opens up opportunities if Tamatoa gets on board. So they have quite a high lore lead and also quite a few different cards to play. Luckily, they're only playing small threats at the moment. We check if Gaston is a villain. So we will be able to use the Sword of Truth here. We do get a free draw. We're going to go ahead and draw another card. And we see Develop Your Brain, which we find 2 item cards. One is very low in cost, but we already have one on the board. Other can help speed us up to catch up to our opponent. So we use the Sword of Truth here because we don't want Maurice to take too much damage. And we'll clear the other member of the board, trying to get to that Pascal that's been here since basically the beginning of the game. Okay, our opponent spends a good chunk of their resources drawing some cards, which is fine with us. We'd rather them not progress their board state. Manages to get another protection for Pascal. So here I'm thinking about drawing cards with Maurice versus getting the draw from Robin Hood. Playing Robin Hood would allow us to gain evasive and get to Pascal. I end up opting in to get the Eye of Fates down and just see what other options we can take. So because we draw 2 grandmas, that will put us at our magical 8 ink for the game that we'd love to get to, because that'll put Tamatoa online. And because of their board state, allows us to trade into 2 of their cards. Okay, puts a big Aladdin back. And our opponent stops playing cards here, which is great. That means we aren't forced to ink our next card. So we do have the option to play Robin Hood and draw a card. Okay, and we draw into our end game. Now, our opponent has 4 lore on board, so we're going to go ahead and put a stop to that. We get closer to the 8. Can't trade into Pascal, unfortunately, but we can at least try and catch up. We do have Robin Hood to get rid of that Pascal, who has done a lot of work for the lore of my opponent. So I think about inking it, but realize that I can just hold until next turn and ink it if I need to. We also can crash the grandma into the Maleficent if they choose to sing or quest. So they are almost at lethal, depending on what they play. And it's a Be Prepared. Luckily, Grandma doesn't have to be challenged in order to put her in the inkwell, so that's good news for us. We'll play the Tamatoa. We only have one target, which is our Sword of Truth, and we'll pass the turn. This is the... We drew the perfect card for this matchup. We needed a big threat to put on board and hope that our opponent doesn't Dragonfire it and play something else. Oh no. They played Dr. Facilier knowing that we pulled our 4-drop card here. The Sword of Truth, which gets rid of a villain. Knowing that purple has so many villains and that it's just a top-end deck in the format. That's why we run this one especially. And we're just kind of able to recycle the process here. So if our opponent does play any more major threats from purple, we can combat them. I choose not to play the Flounder in case my opponent does have another Be Prepared. Then we'll be able to at least get an extra lore on board. And perhaps use the Scepter to give Flounder up to 5 attack with Maleficent. Opponent plays a Mulan, which is unfortunately not enough. Alright, and here is one more bonus game just for you guys. It's a bit of an odd one, but I thought I'd include it anyway.